everybody, it's Dana and welcome. Today we're going to be making a card using the Peonies Bunch stamp set from Hero Arts, and we're also going to be using the color layering Peonies Bunch stencil. There are 4 stencils to this kit, and they absolutely make coloring this gorgeous floral image so easy. Now, before I get started, I do want to share with you that we do have a color guide. So this is going to help you out if you really don't want to think about your color palette. We have 3 beautiful color palettes here that you can quickly start making your cards. I'm going to be using the one in the top right hand corner. So to get started on my card, I'm bringing in a larger piece of cardstock, and this is the Dove White cardstock from Hero Arts, and I want it to be a little bit bigger than what I need because I'm going to show you a little trick to lining up those stencils. So now the flower image is rather big, which I love. It's totally going to fill up a very nice card panel. You can do a 5x7 or a standard A2, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I put that into my Misty, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp this in some Hero Arts ink, but I do want to do a little bit of heat embossing. So I did bring in my powder tool, and the ink I'm using today is the Hero Arts Intensified Black ink. Because I do want a nice crisp image on this, I want to use the blackest ink that I possibly can. And this ink to me stays a little bit wetter, longer, so I'll have a chance to sprinkle on some clear embossing powder. Once I have it all inked up, I am bringing in my pressure tool to assist me on pressing down that flower. Again, it's a very large image and I want this to be nice and crisp, so I am going to stamp it twice. However, before I get ready to stamp that a second time, I do want to open up my powder. Again, this is not a pigment ink, so it doesn't stay wet for a long period of time. So I do want to make sure that I have my embossing powder ready to go. I'll go ahead and set that off to the side, and then I can repeat stamp this. Now again, this is not a dye ink, but it does give me a little bit more leeway to put on that clear embossing powder. Once I know I have a perfect image, and look how gorgeous this is, I can now use that clear embossing powder. You could also use maybe the pearl embossing powder. I think that will look pretty as well, and it would dull back some of that black and almost give it like a gray color. I do make sure to try to get the embossing powder everywhere before I bring in my heat tool, because remember, once I start heating this up, I'm not going to have the opportunity to really add that embossing powder again. So I just want to make sure I have a good coat before I start heating. I will go ahead and move that embossing powder out of the way, and then I will bring in my heat tool. Now I did have this off on the corner heating up because anytime you're melting embossing powder, you want to make sure that your heat tool is very nice and hot, and that's going to prevent some of the warping that you would normally get. Now we have a gorgeous image. I really think this image looks beautiful, even if you just kept it black and white. But of course, today we're going to be using those beautiful color layering stencils. Now, like I said, there's 4 stencils to this. I'm going to be using all 4 of them. But if you wanted to add your own detail, you can totally just use the larger outline stencils and not the interior stencils. So I'll show you what I mean here. This is my first layer for the leaves. And in the stencils, you're going to see these little tiny squares on the corner of each of the stencils. And this is going to help you line up your stencils when you have layering stencils. I'll show you that as well. But now I do make sure to use a little bit of purple tape on the stencil as well as the paper. And there is that little square. I'm making sure that is on the paper so I can see it when I need to line everything up. So this is the first background color, and I'm going to be using moss, and this is actually going to add all the color I need for my leaves. So I kind of just hold that in place, and I'm using a good amount of pressure on here, but not too much because I don't want it to be really dark because I'm going to be putting on a second color. So this is stencil number 1. Now if you just wanted to leave it here, that will be absolutely fine, but I'm going to rub in some color right over that little square, and I'm going to show you why. So I have this great layer here. If I wanted to stop, I could and just have that one wash of color. But I'm going to bring in the layering portion of this. And this is why I wanted to add a little bit of color to that little square at the top, because it allowed me to line up my next stencil by following that little hole that I made. That little impression of ink was able to afford me the opportunity to line up that stencil perfectly. Now I am going to grab a little bit of purple tape again, just to tape that stencil in place. If you did want to use pixie spray, you can use that as well. So I'll make sure everything is lined up. Again, I'm going off of that little tick mark that I made at the top, because remember I said these stencils have that tick mark for a reason. Next, I'm coming in with my second color, which is my pine color. And this is going to really start amping up these leaves. It's going to give these leaves some texture. Now, usually if you were doing this with Copic markers or color pencils, you would really have to work on this. But having the Peonies layering stencils, it makes it super easy. So put on a nice coat of that pine, and when I pull up, voila, look at the depth I now have because I used those stencils. I absolutely love this, you guys. Next, I'm going to come in with the large part to fill in those peonies. Again, I'm lining up my die with that little square at the top, so I know that everything's going to be lined up. One more time, I will come in with some of that purple tape just to make sure that it holds my stencil in place. Now, these stencils are really large, and you might be able to get away with holding them down with your hands, but you know, we have tape for that, so we're not going to make this difficult. We're just not. Next, I'm going to come in with the first color of my peonies, and this color is going to be Orchard. Now, remember, the color palette that I showed you at the beginning is downloadable on the website as well, so you'll be able to keep that as a handy reference for when you're making cards a little bit later. Now I will come in with my blending brushes. Now these are the Hero Arts blending brushes, and I'm adding in that first layer of color. And you can really see how gorgeous this orchid color is. I don't use purples a lot. I know, shocking, because a lot of my teammates do like the color purple. But when I do, I really don't know why I don't use it more often. Have that first layer down. Again, I could stop right here if I wanted to make a very clean and simple card. But we have 4 stencils, right? So why not use them all? Once again, I'm using that little dot in the corner that I made to line up my stencil, and then I can bring in my final color. The final color is this mulled wine, which is absolutely gorgeous. Again, I'll tap that first into my ink, and I would tap some of it off on my glass mat. And as you can see, that's a very vibrant color. So I really don't need to go back into my inks because this is so pretty. And when I pull this up, look how stunning this is. Oh my God, this just makes my heart so happy. It is absolutely so pretty. Now I am going to come in with the coordinating die, and I'm going to die cut this out. And once I'm finished die cutting this out, I'm just going to go ahead and set this aside. Again, this Peonies bunch and the Peonies coloring layer coloring stencils work perfectly together, but let me show you how you can use it separately. So I came in with another piece of Dove White cardstock, and I'm just going to use the residue that's left over from the inking I did earlier. Now, mind you, the stencil is off of my paper. So I have a little black pen, and I'm just going to put a little black dot in the center where that little square is, so I know where I need to line things up again. I'm not going to add any more ink to this. I'm just going to use the residue ink that's left over, and I'm just going to pull that in off of the stencil. This is a great way to clean off your stencils and get another panel or another look off of just that little bit of ink. I can go ahead and pull that aside, and now I'm going to come in with my next layer. Again, I'm using the residue that's left over on the stencil. I'm using that little black tick mark on my glass mat to make sure everything's lined up perfectly. And if you do it this way, remember, you're not going to have the black outlines of the stamp. So this is going to have a totally different look. I can go ahead and lift that up and look how I'm building up that color. One more time, I'm coming in with whatever is left on the stencil. So this is going to be obviously a lighter version of the one that I used to stamp with, but it is oh so pretty just as well. Just pulling in that color. And again, it's going to be a very light variation. And one more time, I'm just pulling in what's left over of that mulled wine. And when I reveal this back, look how gorgeous this is. It is absolutely stunning if you don't want to use the stamp set. So when I pull these two together, look how beautiful that is. This makes such a stunning card. Now, I did feel I wanted to bring in some black since I did stamp and heat emboss that black ink. So I did decide to pull in a card base, or not a card base, a card panel to place this base down onto. Now, the white piece is 1/4 of an inch on two sides smaller than my large piece. So the white piece is going to nestle right onto that black cardstock, and that's just going to give me a very dramatic look of having just that little black peeking out. I did use Hero Arts Precision Glue for this because it gives me a little bit of a wiggle room. And again, that black really works perfectly because it's pulling the black from the flower down onto the card base. Now I want to make sure I leave room for my sentiment. Now there are a few sentiments in here. I decided to use the cute little hello at the bottom, and then I can bring in my Misty and stamp that. Now I do want to tell you, if you're doing this same design, make sure that you put that colored or that black piece, black outline piece rather, on the card so you know that when you put that piece back on, you're not going to block your sentiment. So you can see that I used that first to kind of make sure where I wanted that little hello before I stamped it down. This, of course, is going to guarantee me that once I put that flower back on top, I'm not going to be blocking that image. So one more time, I'm just going to make sure I line it up. I'm going to bring back in the larger piece that would sit on top, and I still have that wiggle room in order to stamp down the sentiment. Now for the sentiment, I am using the same exact ink. This is the Hero Arts Intensified Black ink, and I can go ahead and stamp this down. Now if I wanted to stop here, this right here would be a gorgeous card. It would be stunning. But of course, we did use that other piece. So just remember, in this kind of technique, you can use the stamp set with this, or you can forego the stamp set and just use the stencils. Either way, you're going to have gorgeous cards. Now I can go ahead and bring this out, and we're going to go ahead and finish up the card. Now I did want to place this onto a Dove White card base, so I went ahead and cut some of my cardstock down to make a A2 card. And again, I'm using my wet adhesive here in order for me to be able to slide that panel into place. Now it is going to cover up most of the card, and that's okay. I really don't want any white peeking out. I know there's a little bit at the bottom, but I can trim that off later. So once I have that done, I can get ready and pop on my flower. Now I did decide to die cut 2 additional black pieces to put behind that peonies because I like the depth of the black outline. Again, I'm pulling that black into this card panel. So I did die cut this twice, and this is going to help me not to use foam tape. I can just stack a couple of these pieces on top of each other, and that's going to give me the height I need. And I'm also going to be having a peak of that black. So once it's on the card panel itself, if you tilt it sideways, you're going to have that dramatic black outline behind it. So again, I have 2 black stacked up, and then I would go ahead and put on my stencil piece, and I'm going to have a nice weighted flower now. Now, if you wanted to, you could offset this a little bit so it was almost like casting a shadow on one side. But I decided not to do that for today's card, but I might do that for another card, maybe a little bit later. I'll use that red adhesive one more time to go ahead and put this on the back, and then I can press this into place. Now again, this is a large image, which I love because you don't have to have a lot on a card panel. Now some of this might hang off of your card, but that's okay. I can go ahead and just use my scissors to trim off anything that's hanging off of the side. So once I get that trimmed off, this card is going to be complete. Now again, I showed you two ways. You can use the Peonies Bunch stamp set by itself with the stencils, or use the stencils by themselves. Either way, it creates such a beautiful card. So remember, if you're stuck on those color palettes, don't forget to grab that color guide. I think this is such a stunning card, and I really like the light and the dark parts of using the stencil. All right, everybody, that's a wrap for the card today. Don't forget to subscribe to the Hero Arts channel so you can get all of your Hero Arts tutorials. Until next time, everybody, bye-bye.